Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Eating Evolution series. I'm Karina, Conscious Eating Catalyst and so Relationship Guide, and have created this series to give you more holistic overview around the transformative power of food, so you are more enabled and empowered to make healthier and more mindful choices for yourself and this planet. And today we are going to talk about food freedom and making peace with food with Eve Lahijani. And Eve is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and nutrition therapist, is a TEDx speaker and self-proclaimed foodie. Her gift lies in helping her audiences and clients make behavior change simple and second nature. These practical modifications lead to big results and improved health, heightened mental clarity, enhanced stamina, and increases overall effectiveness. Eve specializes in helping those who engage in emotional eating, compulsive eating, and other forms of non-hunger eating, as well as anorexia and bulimia. She is passionate about helping women listen to their bodies, trust their hunger, and make peace with food. Eve, I'm very happy to have you here. A warm welcome from my side.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here too. This is such a fantastic thing that you're doing. So thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you. So I know that you have not always had peace with food in your past. Like how was your journey like, or how did your relationship to food look like in the past?
Oh my goodness. I was terrified of food. I was terrified. I was obsessed. I was thinking about food all the time, trying not to have it. I struggled with everything from anorexia, exercise, bulimia, binge eating, so many things, compulsive overeating, emotional eating. I really struggled with food it almost seems like in every iteration. So yeah, I've experienced a lot of hardship when it came to food, and I knew it was a real problem because I think about food all day, and I actually even started having nightmares about overeating too. So it was a real challenge.
And like, how was it, like in general, how did your transformation start to transition out of whatever you were experiencing, or how your relationship to food looked like?
Great question. A big part of the reason why I was experiencing so many of these challenges is because I was always on a diet. I was always trying a new diet, new forms of restriction, and I started to notice a pattern. I noticed that, when I would restrict my choices and not let myself eat what I was truly craving, that I would actually become obsessed with the food. I would think about it all day, and it was just a matter of time that I would go overboard and overeat on that specific food that I wouldn't let myself eat. So it was kind of like a pendulum that swings. I'd be so good at resisting, and it was only a matter of time before I would go overboard on exactly the food that I told myself I wasn't allowed to have. I also started to reject diets because I noticed that whenever I was eating, I was feeling guilty. I was feeling ashamed. I was always breaking a rule because, there's so many diets out there. You're always breaking a rule when you're eating because it either has carbs or proteins or fat or whatever, it's organic, it's not organic. There's so many rules to follow. And I found I'd feel so guilty while I was eating. I wasn't able to enjoy my food. And this sounds simple, this sounds unimportant, but because I was so distracted in my mind while I was eating, I wasn't enjoying my food. And because I wasn't enjoying my food, I wasn't present, I wasn't satisfied. And that was the weirdest thing. I'd be overeating, but I would still be unsatisfied with the food I was eating because the whole time I was eating it, I wasn't present with it. I was in my head the whole time.
Yeah.
And so that was another really big problem with the diets. And another big issue with the diets that I teach a lot about now is, I was so good at following rules and, doing what I think I should do. I got good at ignoring my hunger. And I'm sure you've seen these things like, hopefully not anymore, but, I tried to ignore my hunger, minimize my appetite, eat the smallest thing on the menu, go low calorie. And a really interesting paradox started to occur, that when I got good at ignoring my hunger, and I would feel so proud too, you know, at the time I was so proud that like I didn't need to eat. The better I got at ignoring my hunger, the better I got at ignoring my fullness too. I would notice that I get totally stuffed.
So you would go into like both extremes.
Yes, yes. I was so good at ignoring my body at the time. So it was amazing. I was just realizing that these rules I had were all being counterproductive. They were all counterproductive at best. They were all backfiring and making me more obsessed with food, more likely to have cravings, and I would actually binge or overeat because I was trying to follow these rules. So from that point, I made the decision to never diet again. So letting go of diets wasn't that hard to do. I mean, it was hard, but I had so much evidence of how much they backfire. It was like, you know, am I crazy to do this? And that's the sad thing, right? So many people, they want to improve their eating and they're trying their best. So they think, okay, I want to eat better. Let me go on a diet. And so, but you know, after a point in life, you realize that, oh my God, when I do that, it just backfires.
Yeah, it's like not a sustainable way. It's always like a short amount of time often that you are able to commit to. Like I'm not one that has a lot of experiences with dieting. Somehow it never really occurred to me. Very appealing, or it was not intuitively very present. But what was like for you the really struggling part, why you were so focused on dieting? Like what was behind the scene that brought in this restriction or interest of controlling like the food intake? And yeah.
That is such a profound question that has an infinite number of answers, ranging from, you know, I could blame social media. Well, growing up, there wasn't social media. There was just like the media of what I thought I should look like. But I feel a bigger part of it had to do with not knowing myself, rejecting my emotions, not having the tools or the skills to feel that, and actually feeling out of control in my own life. So I used food, and not just food, also exercise, and dealing with that in a rigid way. And sometimes people think like, oh, isn't that good? You're rigid with your food or you're rigid with your exercise. Doesn't everybody want that? But what happens is it never taught me how to cope with the issue. So I feel like my issues around what was happening in my life or feeling out of control, I just took that out on food. Either being ultra rigid, or what turns out is when you're ultra rigid with food starts to work emotionally as well. So it was such a mess. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, like definitely. And I think a lot of like, especially I think it's for a lot of people, it's a way of controlling their weight, or thinking that that's like a way of, you know, because in a lot of dieting, people quit or commit to it because of wanting to lose weight and not knowing really what it means to eat healthy. And through eating healthy, then your weight will automatically balance itself out. Or what is your thought on that?
Yeah, I think healthy is a very loaded word. You know, for some people, healthy means 0 calories, you know, or non-fat. You know, it's funny, a side story. I used to work at UCLA, and they were trying to identify what foods in the vending machine are healthy and unhealthy. And because they had like a certain criteria, and gummy bears fit the criteria, and we had to go back and be like, wait a second, just because it's low calorie and, you know, is fat free, it doesn't qualify as a healthy food. So healthy is a very loaded word. So I like to use words like nurturing or supportive to help identify. It was interesting. Gummy bears were healthy and almonds were not, because they had too many calories or too much fat. So yeah, I feel like, you know, part of what really helped me like really overcome my eating issue, and really when it comes to healthy eating, I think it comes back to feeding, well, at least for me, about feeding myself with love. Like, what did it mean to me? Like, what does feeding myself with love really look like? What does it mean? And for me, that meant, like what you're saying, is nutritious meals.
Mhm.
which was a balance of good nutrition, foods that I wanted to be eating, but also those foods that aren't perfect, or didn't fit, like that foods that I was told I shouldn't be eating. I relearned how to integrate that in a way that was safe, in a way that was gentle. And doing that kept me from going overboard on the food. Also, feeding myself with love. And this is what's so interesting about food. It's not just the nutrition of the food that we're eating, it's also about how we eat the food. So I actually started to create space for myself to eat. And what I mean by space, I meant like a space, like where I would eat that was dignified. And it also meant time, actually giving myself time to eat, which I feel is so remarkable for a lot of people. I know I call myself a foodie, but a lot of the people I work with, they also call themselves a foodie. But when I ask them about their eating, they never give themselves the time and the space to truly enjoy their food. So that was a really big part. And that was like a turning point for me when I was accepting my need to eat and to nurture myself. And I actually sanctified the time, I sanctified the space. And it turns out biologically, the more relaxed you are when you're eating, the more present you are, the right enzymes get released and you actually digest your food better. You're better able to assimilate more of the nutrition when you're more present with the food. So when I talk about nutrition, it's not just about, what you're putting in your plate or what I put in my plate. It's about how I'm eating as well. So really, really interesting practices around feeding was really big for me too.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so cool. And like from your perspective, how was it really beginning for you to really let go of dieting and then making the switch over to making peace with food? And like what does it really mean to you to have food freedom?
Yes, such a great question. It meant, as I mentioned earlier, letting go of diets. It meant feeding myself in that dignified way. And in the place of these rules and these guidelines that everybody was telling me to do, or I was reading about or going online about, is I learned how to listen to me. And that was a beginning of a beautiful relationship with myself. Learning how to ask myself, what do I want? What makes sense for me here? Not just nutritionally. So when it came around food, it was learning about, what flavors do I like? What textures will satisfy me right now? What temperature would be really good? So like on a hot day, I would want more cooler foods. On a cold day, I'd like soups or something warm, and actually allowing myself to do that. And for people who don't diet, I'm not sure if they could relate to this, but for those of us who are dieting, we're so good at following rules. Listening to ourselves, especially around food, is like a very daring and bold thing. So it was very scary. It was very interesting. It was exhilarating, and at the same time terrifying, asking myself questions like, wait, what will really be satisfying here? Because I was so used to asking myself, wait, what's the lowest calorie thing? Or, what is on the healthy part of the menu? It was about, no, really attuning to myself. Sometimes when I would tune to myself, I'd still make the nutritious choice or whatever, but it was coming from a different place. And so learning how to listen to myself this way was a gift, because I was also able to distinguish, like, okay, am I hungry? Oh my goodness, this is actually sadness. So listening to myself was also being able to expand my capacity to recognize my emotions, as well as learning how to feel them. Now, this is big. So many people talk about wanting to release emotional eating or to release their eating issues, but they don't have a clue on how to sit and be present with themselves, with their emotions. There's so many different ways to do that, but that was also key in helping me overcome, my eating issues. And what came out of that was something so remarkable. My intuition became heightened. I was able to see things I don't want to say like I became psychic or anything, but I was able to see things I didn't know I was seeing before. So part of learning how to be present with my emotions was also being able to accept what my life was showing me was true.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it was instead of like seeing things the way I want them to be or the way I feel like they should be, I was seeing things as they were.
Mhm.
And that was such a beautiful gift. And so like, you know, yeah, so as you could see, it was a journey.
So
And
it was actually, food was just the starting point for you to really open up to a completely different path for yourself, right?
absolutely, yes.
And unfolded really beautifully, I think. And I think it's like food can be a great starting point to go on that journey, because I think you said it as you described it, like your entire relationship with yourself began to like, you know, change as you were changing the relationship with food you were having and opening up to listen and to be present. And that was then like opening up a space for yourself as well to open up and listen more to your inner guidance and what was already there, what you might have not been listening to because you were following an agenda that was like coming from the outside. And what was the scary part though? Because you said that earlier, it was kind of scary and terrifying to go on that path. Do you know what where it came from?
Yeah, of course, because well, I guess I'll start by saying I live in Los Angeles, California, near the ocean, so it's very image centric. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody, I mean, still to this day, very few people that I know are daring enough to listen to their appetites.
Mm-hmm.
Appetite with food, appetite with life, you know, especially as women. I don't know if it's also just my culture as well. We're so good at, you know, making ourselves small and not being authentic with ourselves. So it's very daring to, you know, say, I'm hungry and a salad is not going to really satisfy me when everybody else I was eating with was eating like one little leaf at a time. That was really scary.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if I was out and it was late and it was past a certain hour, but my body needed food and it was taboo. It's taboo to eat after a certain hour. Like it was scary to be like, no, I actually need to get food right now. That was very scary because it went against cultural norms. It went against what I thought was healthy. Again, with the air quotes, what I thought was healthy. Also wanting to have a certain type of body. It was scary to break all of these rules that kept me safe, doing what everybody else was doing, you know, following what I thought was the right thing. It's kind of like I became the black sheep of food, you know, in my community and with the way I used to be and my friends. It was so scary. And also, part of why it was scary too is in the past, if I let myself fully enjoy or indulge, you know, I would always feel like I had to make up for it, or I had to punish myself for it, you know, or restrict thereafter. And so that was another really big thing that was part of food freedom for me. I mean, all of this was part of food freedom, really, was no longer punishing myself. Punishing myself by eating less food or skipping meals or having a Tic Tac for dinner, like a you know, a small gum for dinner, or no longer killing myself at the gym by working out, you know, too much. I wasn't doing that anymore. I wasn't willing to do that anymore because again, I was cultivating a relationship with me. And so what I did instead of that punishment and that anger and that
Mm-hmm.
is I started to get curious. Like, hey, you know, what happened?
I love that. I think that is such an important part, like getting curious and excited about experimenting and seeing what ways, if I make a different decision here, or if I let go of that restricted mindset or so, rather like opening up and just being, you know, okay, let's see, let's look what's behind there. Why is it so scary?
Yes, absolutely. I love the way you say it. It adds more excitement to it too. 'Cause yeah. So it was interesting because especially if I would mess up with food, like if I accidentally got too full or if I ate the wrong thing or whatever, ooh, I get so mad and I'd like, you know, I would be so punishing. But those were the times, precisely those times that my eating wouldn't go the way I wanted it to, where there would be such profound learning. So learning how to be compassionate with myself and nice to myself when I was the most mad really flipped things around for me. And that's when I actually needed my love the most, to be like, that's interesting. Why did I overeat here? Or what fed into that? Or where did that craving come from? Really started to give me a language of listening to myself and honoring myself. So those dreaded overeatings that I used to hate actually became like a beam of light. It showed me aspects of myself that I wasn't aware of. It was actually quite a beautiful thing. Like I learned to see those times as like, okay, so what fed into this, you know? And so that shifted a lot, no longer punishing.
And I think that's very important, like this non-judgmental aspect.
Yeah.
Whenever you know, eat something which you usually felt guilty about that you maybe shouldn't have eaten, just accepting in that moment, okay, you made that choice now, you don't need to make that choice like in the future or whenever on the next time, next meal, I have another choice available.
You know, you're so right. But at the time, I mean, when I was restricting, and for many people out there who restrict, when we mess up, and I say mess up in air quotes, like eat the wrong thing or accidentally eat too much, like we see red. We're like, oh my goodness, why did I do this? Let me fix this, you know? And the sad thing about this, whether we compensate, sometimes what happens is like if we're going to compensate or punish, this weird thing happens that we start to feel deprived because we're telling ourselves you're not allowed to have the next meal or you're never going to eat that again. That sometimes the binge continues and continues and continues. And so one of the reasons why I know I would do this in several of my clients, why they binge day after day after day, is because they haven't forgiven themselves for the original
Wow.
thing. So it continues. It's very fascinating. It's such an amazing thing to be on the other side of. So when I tell people like you could have food freedom and experiencing it, oh, it's such a blessing.
And I think it's like it came earlier in when you were talking about the restrictions. I think it's really a beautiful metaphor where you can look into where else in your life do you restrict yourself. Was there something that you could or is there something that you can definitely relate to where you saw like patterns playing out in other areas of your life where you also were restricting or not allowing yourself to be a certain way?
Yes, that's a great question. The first thing that comes to my mind was like relationships, being vulnerable in relationships, and not just romantic relationships, relationships with friends, trusting myself with my family, allowing myself to be myself. I was restricting and trying to be this perfect thing that doesn't exist. So I think the area where I was restricting was not allowing myself to show up as my authentic self. And that's heartbreaking. You know, when I had to edit myself to try to be what I thought other people wanted to be, that's like the worst form of restriction because it impacts every single area of life, you know? And so learning how to listen to my appetite, learning how to satisfy it was the catalyst for allowing me to be my authentic self in other areas of my life as well.
Wow, so powerful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, that's why when people struggle with food, I want to shout out like, hey, it's not minor. People say, oh, it's just food. Everybody else struggles. But the ramifications are so profound and touch every area of life.
Yeah, and I think it's so like that's where your work I think is so important because it like goes even beyond the food and helping people to make the connection that it's not just about the food, but it's one aspect of your life where it's playing out a certain way.
Yes.
So cool. And so from your perspective, how would like a satisfying, nutritious and balanced or how like food choices in that way, how would they look like for you?
Ooh, I could just tell you what I had for my past few meals. Do you mean literally and specifically, or are you talking more generalized?
You can say both, whatever you like.
Yeah, great. So for me, part of what I like to consider, as I mentioned, the environment, taking time and space for my meals is so sacred, especially because the work I do is service and I want to be present for my clients and the people that I work with, it's very important that I nurture myself throughout the day in satisfying ways. So that means cultivating and creating a sanctified eating experience as a way to refill my own tank. So part of the meal isn't even what I eat, it's also the environment. I notice you're laughing and smiling.
No, it's just like so beautiful as you say it, because it's like through you giving you the time and the space for nourishing yourself, you are able then to be more present with others. And I think just the way you presented it was just lighting me up.
I know, but she's smiling. What's happening? Well, it's true. I love what I do, and I always want to be able to be as present as I can be as people are going through transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it has to do with creating that space and that time. No media, no books, no phone, no computer or whatever. I really practice what I preach in that way. Sometimes, like, usually I have a candle lit, but a candle might be lit. And so to me, the components of what bring me satisfaction in my meals is usually when I'm, calculating what I'm going to eat. I first think, okay, where am I getting my protein from? I love protein. It makes me feel so satisfying. So today in the meals I had, in one meal it was the whole wheat, no, it's not a whole wheat. It's like a protein pasta. Another one was the beans in my salad. Sometimes I love turkey burgers. So again, I think, where's the protein coming from? What's interesting about the protein, I feel like a lot of people have judgment about animal protein and plant protein. And what I've learned biologically, nutritionally, is that that's very individualized. And it works for some bodies beautifully to be plant-based. And I know there's a trend towards that. But I've had other clients who've experienced hair loss, anemia. So even though they're replacing their protein with good plant protein. So that's why I love the work I do. It's so individualized. So again, protein. The next thing I think about is carbohydrate. This is the biggest taboo in the nutrition world. Like, carbs are not to have carbs. And it's so important to rejuvenate yourself by your blood sugar levels, bringing them back up to normal through having carbs. So I usually have some source of carbohydrate. So whether it's, some pita bread or some brown rice or pasta, the carb is definitely there. I love vegetables. So that's usually the easy part. I love to saute. I like grilling onions or putting broccoli and zucchini in the oven. I love that kind of stuff, or a side salad if I have no time. I even sometimes defrost organic vegetables, People sometimes think, oh, everything has to be perfectly fresh. No. I mean, I love that ideal world when everybody has a caterer that brings them like a nutritional A+ every time.
Or you have your own backyard and available and have everything accessible right in front of your door. But, we live in a different world. And I think there is like the thing of practicality that comes as well into place, where you have a certain amount of time during the day, and you need to see where you need to cut things or be more gentle, or do things like that, which you just described.
Yes, I love that you use the word gentle, because I feel like feeding yourself with love or being gentle with yourself is the foundation of health. And isn't that what that's all about anyway, is like health, inner peace, longevity, a good life. And I feel like gentleness is the secret. So thank you for using that word. Also, source of fat. Again, fats for some people is like an F word. They're afraid to have it, but it's really important for me to have a source of fat to help me feel satisfied longer. So those are some of the components I'm thinking about when I think about, okay, planning my meal. It's the environment, it's setting the time, and it's also having something nutritionally balanced that I love. So oftentimes it ends up being something like Mexican food or Thai food or Asian food, because those are foods that I love. Persian food, I love that too. So.
And do you find yourself as well sometimes in places where you're more stressed or don't have as much time available? How do you manage them then? Do you then still like create that sacred space, or is it then more, not as sensual as it usually is? Do you find yourself in those situations as well?
Yes, I do. And it happens. And when that happens, I also have to be gentle with myself then too, right? Of, oh my goodness, I'm not practicing what I preach. It makes it easier to even be harder on myself. So when that happens, I still try my best to be non-distracted. Even if I have to eat something really fast or something that, you know, isn't great, I still try to be as present for it as I possibly can. Because that to me is really big. Again, I really enjoy food. So I'm like, oh, if this is the moment of truth, I'm really going to enjoy it. And so sometimes, you know, if I don't have time to prepare like this beautiful meal, if I have something out of the freezer, I still try to eat it in like a mindful way. Or if I'm eating a bar, you know, again, not a nutritional A+, I don't usually recommend it, but sometimes, you know, you're out and, you know, you're in the middle of something and you get hungry. So sometimes it is going to be a bar or something. I still try to eat that with intention and attention, even though it might not be a nutritional A+. And I think, you know, speaking of a nutritional A+, like having to have the perfect food every time, I feel like that might be one of the most unhealthy messages that is out today. Because of course, you know, I'm a dietitian, I have a master's in it. I want people to make nutritious choices, but that perfectionism that's applied to food could be so problematic for people. So, yeah.
So do you think that there's as well like the possibility to go too far into like a healthy way of eating and getting too obsessed with doing that on the other end as well?
Yes, actually that's the newest
Trend, right?
or it's actually they've identified it as an eating disorder now. It's called orthorexia.
Okay.
Orthorexia is those people who, you know, everything has to be the healthy version. Like it always has to be brown rice and it always has to be, you know, whole wheat or, you know, the leanest cut or whatever. And there's this fixation over always trying to make the perfect choice. And it's so interesting because nutritionally, yes, every choice that they make is just so perfect. However, and again, I say that with air quotes, however, if they have a meal that is subpar, they just can't handle it, you know, or their anxiety goes too high, or it really interferes with their inner peace. So that is actually something that we're seeing more and more these days. People trying to eat in this perfect way. Again, it's called orthorexia for anybody who wants to look it up. Yeah, it's a big problem out there.
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about because you see it a lot like in the health community. I feel that especially as food has become such a big thing in society, or especially in social media, Instagram or whatever, I think there's a lot that, you know, you forget to. And I found myself actually kind of in a similar situation in a way of, because I had like lived with severe dermatitis for many years, and food was for me the turning point to begin like to create a healthier relationship with myself, because I was beginning to, you know, nurture myself more with food and becoming more conscious about what I was putting into my body and how it was like how I was reacting actually, because I had a lot of food sensitivities. But it turned at some point into a form of fear as well, on the other hand, of certain foods that I was sensitive to, which I think then as well can mess up the way of like your thoughts, and then your emotions attached to it can make it even worse than actually eating the food just by itself.
I just really want to acknowledge you for healing your body, and having the dedication and the love in doing that, because I know it takes a lot of love. And on the other side, I really love that you're able to see that, hey, maybe it's gone too far, or, you know, maybe there's something else going on. That's really wise, and such a level of sensitivity that you have there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But it actually as well for you, like with you, it opened me up, because it wasn't like the ultimate resolution for the problems or the challenges that I was facing. You know, it opened me up to a more holistic viewpoint around healing and connecting back to myself in different ways as well, like looking into relationships, like how I was showing up in different areas of my life, like do I love the things that I do, all those things. And I think it can be like it can be going into the direction of, you know, getting crazy and muddling and blurring everything up, but it can as well be used as, you know, an opening to a new and different pathway. And that's like the incentive or the thing that I want to, you know, use the summit for, to give people more the opportunity of, you know, making a more holistic connection and see that it can be a starting point, but it is not all. it is not all for, creating health for yourself.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Last year, I took a 10-month consciousness, health, and healing seminar. And that was exactly it. Living your authentic life is ultimately what brings about the most health. And it's so interesting. Although, I love the way you said it, although food is a part of it, there's so many other dimensions to wellness, which is living true to yourself. So again, wow, good for you for, really going for that holistic healing. That's very inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And so I think I would love to wrap it up with one, there will be another one question, but this one, what is your advice for people who want to eat more mindfully whenever, or supportive for their body, more nourishing for their body, whenever they go out into, areas of eating with friends or with family or other gatherings? Is there an advice that you can give them whenever they are challenged with those situations on how to really, not indulge in anything, or really, just staying present with themselves and eating what they want to eat and what they need to eat?
Yes. So I talk about this with clients all the time, of having a plan. So the number one thing is to have a plan, because in each of these situations, something different is going to be a challenge. So in one situation, when it's buffet style, because at your family's house, the plan might be you're going to create a plate of food that has a nice balance of the things you like and that are nutritious, and that's your plan. Or when somebody goes out to eat, it might be a matter of, okay, how are you going to get those different nutritional components in a way that's satisfying? So it depends. It depends for the person and what their trigger points are. I mean, for another person, it might be like when they eat with these people, they get pressured into eating what eating what everybody else is eating. So sometimes the plan is learning how to stand up for themselves and say, thank you for looking out for me, but I know what I need to select. So depending on the situation, and I love doing this type of planning because it's so cool. People go in there, they're prepared, and they leave feeling great, instead of feeling regretful, mad at themselves, bloated, or whatever. So having a plan. So what I like to do, I'll tell you what I do, is you want to think about the parts that are going to be hard. Is it going to be that somebody's pressuring you, or that there's too much variety, or there's a lot of temptation for things you wish you didn't have? What are the challenges? And then again, that's why having a mentor or a coach is super helpful, because I'll help you brainstorm. And then for each of those challenges, I help people come up with a different solution. So sometimes it's actually a communication skill to speak up and say, oh, this is what I want to do. And in other cases, it's nutrition information. Okay, how am I going to make myself a healthy plate here? Other times it's behavioral. It's, okay, serve yourself a plate, eat that in a mindful way, check back in with your body, so it really depends on the situation. But it's a lot of fun to strategize that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what would be your greatest advice that you can give to people? Do you have anything that would be now already helpful that they could practice or bring into their daily way of eating that would assist them right away?
That's a wonderful question. I have a few things. One, I mean, part of a big takeaway is if what I was talking about was resonating, the food obsession, being stressed about food or feeling obsessive, is knowing that that's not normal. That is important. It's significant. And to get help for that, or to start looking for resources to help you overcome that. Because again, it affects every area of your life, and you're worth the investment, the time, the energy, or whatever, to get that addressed. So I feel like that's really key based on what we talked about here today. As for tools to implement immediately, is learning how to tune into hunger and fullness. You don't need to change anything that you're doing, but when you eat, just gauge, where are you in your hunger? So I like to talk about a scale of hunger and fullness that goes from 0 to 10. 0 is if you're starving, you're on empty, your head is hurting, your hands are shaking, your stomach is growling. And 10 is totally stuffed. You're bloated, you're regretful, you feel like your food is feeling totally stuffed. And so I actually have a talk on this that goes further about, trying to eat when you first get hungry. not waiting until you get dangerously hungry, and learning how to recognize the soft, gentle first feelings of satisfaction. And so what I like to tell people to do is don't change anything. Just start noticing, where are you in terms of that scale every time you eat. And for people, that's mind blowing, because they notice that, oh my goodness, every time I eat, I'm so hungry. Or, throughout the day I'm eating and I'm not even hungry at all. Or, Eve, I don't even know what fullness feels like in my body. So I love this tool because it begins that connection between the body, with you and your body. And I feel like that's so important.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. That's powerful. Awesome. And so if people would like to work with you or would love to know more about you, where can they find you and connect with you?
So the best way to reach me is on my website, which is www.vitamineve.com. So it's vitamin and my name, eve.com. And so I try to make my website as inviting as possible. So you could download, I have a free ebook, Stop Overeating Now. And as a special gift to this community, I'm offering a complimentary session with me, a one-on-one food freedom session with me.
Wow.
Yeah, so just because it's an amazing session where people could really define and clarify what exactly they want to achieve with food. I feel like one of the reasons why we don't accomplish what we want in life is we're not clear about it. So this call is really powerful. Yeah, this call is really powerful because it gives people a chance to have.
Gives you the direction. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you that space to decide, what exactly do I want? Then from there, together, we brainstorm like a written list of exactly what is sabotaging you. What is holding you back? What are the patterns that are keeping you stuck? So you leave with this written list. And with that, you're provided with a written list of what's keeping you stuck. And with that, you're left with more energy, more motivation, and more inspiration and clarity on exactly what next step to take. So it's a fantastic call. I love it. I get energized every time I get off one of those calls. So I'm very happy to offer it to your community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And my last question, as you are in the field of positive change and making a difference in this world, I would love to ask you about a message of hope that you have for the audience.
Wow, I love that question. I guess my message of hope is, wanting to have a peaceful, beautiful relationship with food is not asking too much. That's just the beginning of having a fulfilling, meaningful, and happy life. So I feel what you truly want in your life wants you right back. So if you have a desire for anything, not just around food, but in any aspect of your life, that's because life has put that desire in you. And it's not just you wanting that to follow your heart or your dreams or whatever. Life wants that from you. So whatever that is, go for it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Eve, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you here. And thank you all for watching and listening. And please stay tuned on more incredible content on how to eat to improve your health, empower your spirit, and thrive with the planet. See you soon.